Hello everyone, today's poem is Xiaoya, 车匣, a Xiaoya poem from the Book of Songs. This poem belongs to the few most frequently recited poems in the Book of Songs and has a very distinguished character by this poem. The poet described his sorrow and sad feelings toward someone, thinking of someone. Anyhow, he expressed a very positive vision in the last paragraph. So this is quite strange mixed feelings. The contrast between the sad feeling of thinking someone and the very positive, long-eyesighted ground vision gave this poem with very strong strength and power, as well as a feeling lost endlessly. This poem is about noble's wedding ceremony. The general explanation explained this poem as the bridegroom was on his way to greet the bride. So he should feel very happy, right? Well, in this poem, the feeling, the emotion is very, very negative with sadness. And so the general explanation doesn't make sense at all. And from the sentences, it also doesn't support the explanation that the bridegroom was on his way to greet the bride. From the history record, a bridegroom never went to greet his bride. So the greeting was by his brothers, his relatives, or some other peoples, never could be the bridegroom. And let's explore this poem together and see how it was about and who is who. The title 车匣 is a component on the chariot, on the car. It's a very, very critical component to lock the wheel on the axis. So when the chariot was idle, when the people was having a rest, they would always unlock this component and remove the wheel from the axis, from the chariot. And when they are about to start their journey, they will put on the wheel back again and use 车匣 to lock the wheel on that car. So this is a very, very familiar and critical component for the Zhou people. We had this character in 背风泉水. It has the sentence 宰之宰虾. So it describes they are about to start their journey and they should get their chariot, their car prepared. So they oiled the car, the axis, and then they locked the wheel on the axis with 匣, 车匣, 宰之宰虾. So they oiled the car and they locked the wheel on the car. Okay, let's get to the poem now. 监观车之匣兮，丝鸾妓女是兮。I locked the wheel on my chariot with 车匣, and I'm fully ready to start my journey. And I think of my little girl who has gone away. 飞机飞可，德音来阔。It's not because of I'm hungry. It's not because I'm thirsty. It's all about her virtue and her sound. 虽无好友，试验且喜。Even there is no good friends around, but we managed that big dinner, and it's a happy dinner, happy ceremony. When we look to the first paragraph for the first time, actually we had no idea what the poet was talking about. But anyhow, we can feel a little bit sadness, and the poet was signing with the first pair of sentences. He changed the very standard 4-character a sentence into 6-character sentence, but basically he can make it with 4 characters like this. 监官车侠，司妓女士. So he can use the standard 4-character sentence to express all the content, while he put some additional words to make the sentence when you're reading is more with more emotions, and it's more like oral sentences, and you can feel the real emotions, the real sad feelings with the very oral sentence. Just feel it. If we use the 4 characters like this, 监官车侠，司妓女士. But with this poem, you feel it. 监官车之侠兮，丝鸾妓女士兮. You feel the lasting emotion, the feelings of thinking of his little girl. 鸾 is love or thinking of. It's the just same meaning as the character 思, so it doesn't change the meaning at all. So when we overlook the first paragraph, it described a very vivid moment that the poet was about to start. So he was preparing his chariot and put on the wheel on the car and lock the 车匣. And when he was doing all these preparations, he's doing those tasks, in his mind, he was thinking his little girl. 妓女 means the little girl. He was thinking about his little girl who has gone. And he explained it's nothing about thirsty. It's nothing about hungry. It's all about the virtue, the sound of her. Everything is about her. All the thinking is about her little girl. And a little bit he revealed he was returning from a big dinner. So far, basically, we still don't know it's a wedding. But I have read through the poem, and of course, through the history, this poem was explained as a poem of wedding, a wedding ceremony. So we know that. But when we first read this poem, so far, we know the poet feels very sad about her little girl has gone, and he was returning from a big dinner, and he was about to start his new journey. So most likely this journey is back to his own home. Okay, the second paragraph. I rested beside the forest, and there are a few colorful big birds gathered together. And I thought about this morning, my beauty, my little girl. I asked her, I teach her to follow everything with the virtue, to do everything with virtue. And in that big dinner, in the wedding ceremony, we are praised by everyone, and everybody likes her. 晨比朔女, 晨 morning, in this poem means this morning. 朔女, in the surface, it means a big girl. So that's the way the Zhou people's mindset. The bigger, the better, the more beautiful. We had another poem, the title was 硕人, a big, a giant person. So that's a poem about beauty as well. So here, 硕女 basically means a very, very beautiful, very, very good girl. And so here, this girl actually is the little girl to the poet in the first sentence, 丝鸾妓女. So they are these two girls are the same person. And 妓女, little girl, does not mean the size, it means by age, the junior girl. 浩尔无益, 浩尔 like you. So here, you refers to the little girl again. So it's just like the poet was thinking about the little girl. At the same time, he was talking to the little girl virtually, because in the reality, they had already been separated. 无益 means never tired of. So it also means everybody liked the girl in that big dinner. So the second paragraph, the first line is telling us the poet was having a rest on his journey back home, and he saw the colorful birds, and then naturally his mind goes back to his little girl again. So he was thinking about what happened during the morning, or during that morning. The wedding, of course, not a one-day's event, and I know in India, even today, the wedding normally will last for 7 days, and I do believe it's quite similar in the ancient China, especially the grand wedding between two noble families. 7 days, 10 days, a wedding ceremonies. Okay, the third paragraph, the poet was still recalling the wedding ceremony. 虽无止酒, 试饮数几. Even we don't have the best quality wines, but roughly we drink a lot per the code of conduct. 虽无佳肴, 试食数几. Even though we don't have the most luxury dishes, but roughly we had all kinds of foods according to the code of conduct. 虽无得于女, 是歌且舞. Even though I don't have anything valuable for my little girl, but anyhow we danced with sing sound per the code of conduct. So it's all about the recall to that wedding ceremony. In the surface, the poet expressed his sorrow toward his little girl that he didn't provide the best quality wine, the best food for this wedding ceremony, and neither a bunch of dowry for his little girl. But in reality, I think he had gave her a plenty of property for this wedding, because the word 适饮熟己, 适时熟己. So he used the wine and the dishes to tell us actually he has followed the code of conduct already. He had sent a lot of properties, chariots, horses, servants, with his little girl, and per the code of conduct. But in this poem, he said, there's no good wine, there's no good dishes. It's just express his own feeling. He felt he should do more, and no matter how many properties he has gave, or no matter how many things he have done to his little girl, he felt it was not enough. So this expressed his love to his little girl is boundless. The poet feel a little bit humble by saying that he don't have the best wine, he don't have the best food, best dishes. But anyhow, he was still very proud of his virtues by the last pair of sentences. 虽无得于女，是歌且舞. So in the surface, he said, I have no virtue that gave my little girl, but she can dance and she can sing per the code of conduct. So, but in reality, we know that for a girl who can sing and dance, actually is the girls have been well educated with the best virtues. So this is a very humble way of putting it, but we can feel that the poet was really, really proud of that. We were not so wealth with many properties, but we are with the best virtues. My little girl was the girl of best virtues. Okay, the fourth paragraph. 志比高岗，西其作新. So I climb up the high hill, and we cut the wood as the fuel, as the firewood. 西其作新，其叶续矣. When we cut the wood as our firewood, its leaves are so pleasant and so prosperous on those branches. So here is a little bit metaphor here that the big families in the Zhou dynasty are always paralleled or compared as a big tree. So the very ancient ancestor was the root, and then there's many small families afterwards, which was described as the branches, and the leaves are the descendants, normally treated as the descendants. So we still have the words like 开枝散叶, which was used to describe a family is very prosperous and has a lot of descendants. It has nothing to do with the real tree, 开枝散叶. So here, when we look back, you can feel that. So it's very likely it's at the downtime. So they had to stop somewhere on the journey back home, and they cook their meal, and then they make a camp, rest here for overnight. So they choose a high hill to stay down, and they cut the woods for their firewood to cook their meal. And when the poet was doing all these routines, everything, his mind was still full of his little girl. So the branch and leaves very easily aroused his feelings that he was the branch and the little girl was his leaves, just like those prosperous leaves on the branches he cut. And okay, let's continue. 先我构耳，我心谢矣。先 means few, very few, or never. So I could never see you again in the future, and my heart was so empty. I feel such an emptiness. I feel so lost. 构 means to meet and to see. So here we know R is always referring to the little girl, his little girl. So this paragraph actually describes the third snapshot during a day, maybe during several days, but he chose the very morning when he about to start his journey, and then he chose another snapshot in the second paragraph when he take a rest on the midway. And in this paragraph, in the fourth paragraph, he take a snapshot when they have a rest somewhere overnight, and when he cut the woods. So he still, everything he thought is always about his little girl who has just gone away to a new family, married to a new family. 写 is a long word here, should be read as 谢，我心谢矣, which means water or liquid was released, discharged from a vessel. So here it means my heart was discharged. Remember, heart was always the identical to mindset, to feelings, to emotions in Chinese language. So here is quite clear. He feels so empty. He lost his heart. He will feel so sad. There are quite few chances for him to see his little girl again, or maybe he could never see his little girl again. Just imagine the marriage between two noble families. They are both landlords. Normally, they are separate with quite a far distance. The trips between the two families, so 1 week, maybe 1 month distance, and especially according to the code of conduct in the Zhou dynasty, the married girl could never go back to his own parents' family, except very few cases, and some girls may never go back to their parents again in their lifetime. From the first to fourth paragraph, the poet described 3 snapshots during his trip back to his home, and after the grand big wedding ceremony. And one snapshot is when he is about to start his journey and he thought of his little girl. And the second, when he have a short rest in the midday, he still thought about his little girl. And the third is he take a overnight rest somewhere on a high hill. He still think about his little girl. Okay, the last paragraph. 高山仰止，景行行止. In front of the high mountain, I look upward toward it. On the Broadway, I follow it and run. So there's several different explanations toward this very popular and famous sentence, and also this sentence make this poem unique and different and changed the negative, sad mood into a positive with very broad visions. So just imagine it. Look up to the high mountains, the South Mountains. You can imagine that. 景行, so very likely it refers to the Broadway of Zhou. So you can see other words in the Book of Songs quite often. 周道, the Broadway of Zhou, it's just like the highway of Zhou. So it's quite famous Broadway in the Zhou dynasty. Or 周行, so here it refers to 景行. 景 means bright and high. So even it doesn't use the very typical term 周行 or 周道, but everybody explained 景行 as the Broadway of Zhou. So just imagine it. Look high and driving your chariot fast on a Broadway toward the far end. So what's the feeling of it, and how would you feel if you are the person look high to the high mountains and drive your chariot on a Broadway fast and swift? So there is a huge contrast between this sentence and the previous four paragraphs. It's all the four paragraphs are all about the sadness, the thinking, the love toward his little girl who just married. It's so hard to explain why the poet has such a big turnover from a very negative and sadness to a very positive mindset. And from the timing, very likely it's a new day, because the previous four paragraphs is morning, midday somewhere, and at the dawn, nighttime, he take a long rest overnight. So the last paragraph very likely is a new day afterwards, when he just wake up a little bit refreshed after many days of thinking of his little girl, after many days of sadness. He happily looked up and he find out the mountain was so high over there, and the Broadway is so wide and so beautiful ahead of me. So he just drive his chariot, run fast and swiftly, and he feels some of the positive and happiness from that. You can see from the following sentence, 四母肥肥，六配如禽. So the four horses is so swift, and the ropes, 六配, refers to the 6 ropes attached to the house, to the cars, to control the chariot. So you always see the 六配 everywhere in the poems in the Book of Songs. 六配如禽. So this is also creative. The ropes are like the strings on my instrument. So you can, it's related, the driving, to play the musicals. There's all kinds of writings and descriptions about driving the chariot with the 6 ropes, 六配. But this is unique and the most creativity, and which showed the excellent talent of the poet. he was such a capable man with manner. So in the Book of Songs, excellent Lord was always described by describing his drive in a very gentle, nice, very skillful ways. So how well you drive your chariot, how good the Lord, how excellent the Lord was. So it's not self-pride, but it's just describe the status or the inner peace or the inner mind of the poet. He has totally changed away from the sadness before. And this is also reflected in the last sentence. 购尔新婚以慰我心. So I saw your wedding ceremony, and all these comfort satisfied me finally. So the last paragraph is totally different, 180-degree turnover from the previous 4 paragraphs. It describes a very positive feelings, and finally, with the last sentence, he neutralized the sad feelings with the positive feelings together, and which make the final feelings peacefully and very calm. So this is the nature of a real Lord, that he has a very, very sensitive feelings toward people, but finally he could manage himself to stay down with peaceful mind, and finally he could put his focus on something that very, very high, on something that very, very far, with visions. So that's the readout by me, quite different than the general explanations. So you can have your own preference or your own explanations toward this poem. And this poem is a very good comparison reference to another poem in the Book of Songs, Bei Wind, 燕燕, 北风燕燕. So the 北风燕燕 was seeing off a little girl toward her wedding, and this poem is a little bit different and is about a lord back from a wedding of his little girl. Apparently, this poem's writing was more advanced compared to 北风燕燕. It's more indirect, and it has 2 lines developed in the same time. One is his back to his home, the other is recall to his little girl, and finally he neutralized the past events, the wedding ceremony, his little girl, with his concurrent status. He was driving a nice chariot swiftly on the Broadway. The chariot is always used as a vehicle to hold the feelings, the status, the emotions in the time of Book of Songs. So in this poem, you can see by describing the swift, fast chariot running on the Broadway, it shows that the poet finally changed into another quite different positive feelings and emotions, and let the readers and the poet himself to sing something higher and further. The chariot lost its significance after the Zhou dynasty, but to use a vehicle to describe his own feelings on the status is still a very typical writing techniques. Let's see this famous tongue poetry by Li Bai. 轻舟已过万重山. So just feel it and try to feel the feelings and emotions of Li Bai by the status of this small light boat. Okay, that's for today. Bye bye.